Code modules often contain subroutines and functions that are related to each other. If you want to use a variable in more than one procedure within a code module, you can declare that variable as a global variable. For this movie, we will use the variable scope code module, and that is here at the bottom of the navigation pane. So I'll double click it and open it to display the code that it contains. I have two subroutines in this code module. The first is called calculate tax01, and in it I define three variables, one for sales, one for the tax rate, and then one for the tax, and that is a currency value. Then in the second subroutine, which calculates tax, also, I only declare the sales and tax currency variables. I leave the rate commented out. That means I haven't actually defined that rate. And you'll also see that the line where I assign a value to the rate variable is commented out as well. So what's going to happen is that I'm going to see whether this second subroutine will be able to use the value from the previous subroutine. Now, with the cursor flashing in the top calculate tax routine, I'll press F5 to run it, and it indicates that 5% tax on a $1,000 sale is $50. I'll click OK. Now, when I go down to the second routine, you'll see that once again, this code is trying to calculate the tax by multiplying sales by the tax rate, and then it uses a message box to display that result. So I have the sales of 1,000, but the tax rate of 0.04 is commented out, so it's not active. Now if I press F5, we get a tax of 0, and that makes sense. I didn't define a value for the tax rate within this second subroutine. Now if I remove the comment marker from these two lines, the one that defines the rate as a double, and the second that assigns a value of 0.04 to the rate, and now press F5, when I run the code in the second module, Access calculates the tax correctly at $40, and click OK. If you want to use a variable in more than one subroutine, you can declare it as a global variable. And to do that, you define the variable, that is, write the dimension statement above the first sub-statement within the code module. So for example, here we have subcalculate tax01, and if I copy the dim double rate as double line, and then press Ctrl X to delete it, and then click above the first subcalculate tax subline, and press Ctrl V, I now have the rate variable defined outside of the subroutines, so it makes it a global variable. Now if I go down to the second subroutine and comment out the double rate dimension statement, and then also the double rate variable value assignment, and make sure that you press a down arrow or an up arrow, or just move off that line, so that the comment takes hold and that the text appears in green. Now let's see what happens inside Calculate Tax02 if I press F5 to run the code. So we have current sales of 1,000, and if I press F5, I get the answer of 0. And when I click OK, again we can see what happened. Ever since I made the double rate variable a global variable, it has not had a value assigned to it. So now, click in the Calculate Tax 1 subroutine and press F5 to run it. We get the value of 50, which is correct. Now if we go down to the second subroutine and press F5, we get a value of 50 as well. That's because Access has assigned a value to the global variable, which is double rate, and click OK. Now let's remove the comments from the double rate as double statement and the assignment. So what we have now is two versions of the same variable, double rate, which is a global variable, and then a local variable that only operates within the Calculate Tax subroutine, and that is with a value of 0.04. So now if we're in the second subroutine and press F5, we get the result we intended, which is 40. One thing you can't do is assign a value to a global variable in the declaration section. So for example, if I wanted to go up above the first subline and then type double rate equals 0.03, and then press a down arrow, and then try to run either of the code modules by pressing F5, I would get a compile error saying that it's an invalid action outside of a procedure. And click OK, and then I'll just go ahead and delete the line. It's okay to use variables with the same names inside of separate subroutines, but you need to be careful with your variable naming and usage when you introduce global variables. I personally use global variables sparingly, but they're a valuable technique to have in your programming toolkit.